Welcome to Critical Crime, the podcast that dives deep into some of the craziest crimes in history. Today we unravel the haunting mystery of the Yuba County Five. Five young friends vanished without a trace after a night of fun, leaving behind a trail of questions and theories that continue to captivate the world. Join us as we explore the twists and turns of this confusing tale and searching for the truth behind the Yuba County Five case. This is Critical Crime. The Yuba County Five were a group of young men from Yuba City, California, each with mild intellectual disabilities who attended a college basketball game on the night of February 24th, 1978. Four of them, Bill Sterling, Jack Hewitt, Ted Weiher, and Jack Madraga, were later found dead, but fifth grader Matthias has never been found. Several days after they went missing, the group's Mercury Montego was found abandoned in a remote area of Plumas National Forest, on a dirt road far out of their way back home. Investigators could not determine why the car was abandoned, since it was in good condition and could have been pushed out of its snowpack with no problem. No trace of a man was found, and around this time, investigators did not know what was to come. You see, once the snow melted in June, four of the men's bodies were found in and near a trailer camp used by backpackers as a shelter deep in the forest, actually about 20 miles away from the car. Only bones were left of three of the bodies in the woods, a result of animals having their way with them. Ted Weiher, who was the one found in the trailer, had apparently lived for as long as 3 months after the men were last seen starving to death despite a decent amount of food and heating nearby. He did not have his shoes on, but investigators did find Matthias' shoes in the woods, suggesting Matthias also survived beyond the group's last sighting. This would be the start of a theory that still haunts the Matthias family to this day.
Jumping into an ad real quick, 5 Star Arrangements is a sportswear company that reminds their customers you're born a star and will always be a star. Even when things are going downhill, the best is yet to come. You can follow them on Instagram at 5 Star Arrangement. Link to their Instagram and website will be in our caption for this video.
We'll touch more on this a bit later, but a local man later claimed that he had spent the same night in his car a short distance from where the Montego was found. He told police that he had seen and heard people around his vehicle that night and twice called for help, only for them to grow silent and turn off their flashlights. All these suspicious activities have led many to believe that foul play was involved. Here's a little background on Matthias. While stationed in West Germany as part of his United States Army service in the early 1970s, Matthias, a native of Yuba City, developed drug problems. This led to him being diagnosed with schizophrenia and given a psychiatric discharge. Matthias returned to his parents' home in Yuba City and began treatment at a local mental hospital. He was nearly arrested twice for assault and often experienced psychotic episodes that landed him in a local VA hospital. He was being treated on an outpatient basis and was considered by his physicians to be, as I quote, one of our sterling success cases. Matthias supplemented his Army disability pay by working in his stepfather's gardening business. Off the job, outside of his family, he was close friends with 4 slightly older men who either had slight intellectual disabilities, which was Sterling and Hewitt, or who were informally considered slow learners. This would be Weiher and Madraga. I would like to make it clear that this was the nicest way that they were referred to, since this was the old days and people were very ignorant to these type of issues the men had. Like Matthias, each man lived with his parents, all of whom referred to them as the boys. The 5 men's favorite hobby was sports. Their families said that when they got together, it was to usually play a game or to watch one. They played basketball together on a team called the Gateway Gators. This team was supported by a local program for people with mental disabilities. On February 25th, the Gators were due to play their first game in a week-long tournament sponsored by the Special Olympics, for which the winners would get a free week in LA. The 5 men had prepared the night before, some even laying out their uniforms and asking their parents to wake them up on time. They decided to drive to Chico that night to cheer on the UC Davis basketball team in an away game against Chico State. Madraga, the only member of the group besides Matthias who had a driver's license, drove the group north to the Chico State campus in his 1969 Mercury Montego. The men wore light coats against the cool temperatures that time of year. After Davis won the game, the group returned to Madraga's car and drove from Chico State to Bird's Market in downtown Chico. There, they brought snacks along with sodas and a carton of milk to drink. It was shortly before 10 p.m. closing time. The clerk later remembered the men because she was annoyed that such a large group had came in and delayed her from beginning the process of closing the store for the night. None of the men were seen alive after that point. At their homes, some of their parents waited up to make sure they returned. When morning came and they had not, the police were notified. Police in respective counties began searching along the route the men took to Chico. They found no signs of him. However, a few days later, a park ranger told investigators he had seen the Montego parked along Oroville and Quincy Road in the forest on February 25th. At the time, he had not considered it significant since many residents often drove up that road into Sierra Nevada on winter weekends to go cross-country skiing on the extensive trail system. But after reading the missing persons bulletin, he recognized the car and led deputies to it on February 28th. Inside the car was evidence suggesting that men had been inside it between when they were last seen and when it was abandoned. The empty wrappers, cartons, and cans that were purchased in Chico were present, along with programs from a basketball game that they had attended and a neatly folded California road map. However, the discovery of the car raised more questions than answers. One question was its location. You see, it was 70 miles from Chico, far off any direct route to Yuba City or Marysville. None of the men's families could figure out to why the men might have driven up a dirt road on a wintry night deep into a remote forest without any extra clothing and on a night before a basketball game that they had been talking about excitedly for several weeks. Madraga's parents said he did not like the cold weather and had never been up into the mountains. Sterling's father said he had once taken his son into the area where the car was found for a fishing weekend, but the younger man had not enjoyed it and remained at home while his father took later trips there. Police could not figure out why the men had abandoned the car. They had reached 4,400 feet in elevation along the road about where the snow line was that time of year, just short of where the road was closed for winter. The car had become stuck in some snowdrifts, and there was evidence that the men tried to spin the wheels to get out of it. Police noted that the snow was not so deep that 5 healthy young men would not have been able to push the car out. The keys were not present, suggesting at first that the car had been abandoned because it might have been functionally incorrectly, maybe planning to return to it later with help. When police hot-wired the car, the engine started immediately, and the fuel gauge indicated the gasoline tank was 1/4 full. The mystery deepened after police towed the car back to the station for a more thorough examination. The Montego's undercarriage had no dents, gouges, or mud scrapes, not even on its lower-hanging muffler. It was as if whoever was driving was very cautious or very familiar with the road, a familiarity that Madraga was not known to have. His family said that he would not have let someone else drive his car. The car was unlocked and a window had been rolled down when it was found. His family indicated it was unlike him to leave his car in such an unsecured state. Efforts to search the vicinity were hampered by a severe snowstorm that day. 2 days later, after searchers and snowcats nearly became lost themselves, further search efforts were called off due to continuing bad weather. In case you're wondering what a snowcat is, it's basically a snow jet ski from what I saw when I searched it up. However, no trace of the men was found other than the car. In response to local media coverage of the case, police received several reports of some or all the men being sighted after they had left Chico, including some reports of them being seen elsewhere in California or the country. Most pieces were quickly dismissed, but 2 of the sightings stood out. Joseph Shawns of Sacramento, who was the witness that we briefly talked about earlier, told the police that he somehow wound up spending the night of February 24th to 25th near the where Montego was found. He had driven up there where he had a cabin to check the snowpack before a weekend ski trip with his family. At 5:30, about 150 feet up the road, Shawns ended up also getting stuck in the snow. In the process of trying to free himself, he realized he was experiencing the early symptoms of a heart attack and went back in, keeping the engine running to provide heat. 6 hours later, lying in the car and experiencing severe pain, he saw headlights coming up behind him. Looking out, he saw a vehicle parked behind him, headlights on, with a group of people around it, one of which seemed to be a woman holding a baby. He called the party for help, but they stopped talking and turned their headlights off. Later, he saw more lights from behind him, this time flashlights. They also went out when he called to them. After that, Sean said at first he recalled a pickup truck parking 20 feet behind him briefly, but continuing down the road. Later, he clarified to the police that he could not be sure that at this time, since he was almost delirious from all his pain. After Sean's car ran out of gas in the early morning hours, his pain stopped enough for him to walk 8 miles down the road to a lodge, where the manager drove him back home, passing the abandoned Montega at the point where he recalled hearing the voices originate from. Doctors later confirmed that he indeed experienced a mild heart attack. Wyer's mother said ignoring someone's pleas for help was not like her son if he had been present. She recalled how him and Sterling had helped someone they knew get to the hospital after overdosing on Valium. The other notable report was from a woman who parked at a retail store in the small town of Brownsville, 30 miles from where the car was abandoned. On March 3rd, a woman who saw flyers that had been distributed with the men's pictures and information about the $1,215 reward put up by the men's family told deputies that 4 of them had stopped at the store in a red pickup truck 2 days after the disappearance. The store owner corroborated her account. The woman said she immediately realized the men were not from the area because of their big eyes and facial expressions. The 2 men, whom she identified as Hewitt and Sterling, were in a telephone booth outside the store while the other 2 went inside. The police said she was a credible witness and they took her account seriously. Additional details came from the store owner, who told investigators that the men he believed to be Wyher and Hewitt came in and brought burritos, chocolate milk, and soft drinks. Wyher's brother told the Los Angeles Times that while driving to Brownsville in a different car, an apparent ignorance of the basketball game seemed entirely out of character for them. The owner's description of the 2 men's behavior seemed consistent with them, as Wyher would eat anything he could get his hands on, and was often accompanied by Hewitt more than any of the other 4. Hewitt's brother said Jack hated using telephones to the point that he would answer calls for Jack whenever he received any from the other men of the group. With evidence not pointing to any clear conclusion about what happened that night the 5 men disappeared, police and the families were not ruling out the possibility that they had met with foul play. The eventual discovery of the 4 out of the 5 men's bodies seemed to suggest otherwise, but raised even more questions about what happened that night, and whether at least one of them might have been rescued. On June 4th, with most of the higher elevation snow melted, a group of motorcyclists went to a trailer maintained by the United States Forest Service at a campsite off the road about 19.4 miles from where the Montega was found. The front window of the trailer had been broken. When they opened the door, they were overcome by the odor of what turned out to be a decaying body inside. It was later identified as Wyher's. The next day, searchers found remains that were later identified as those of Madraga and Sterling on the opposite side of the road, 11.4 miles from where the car had been found. Madraga's body had been partially consumed by scavenging animals. Only bones remained of Sterling, scattered over a small area. Autopsy showed that they both died of hypothermia. Deputies think that one of them may have given in to the need to sleep that comes with the late stages of hypothermia, while the other stayed by his side and died the same way. 2 days later, as part of one of their search parties, Hewitt's father found his son's backbone under a manzanita bush, 2 miles from northeast of the trailer. His shoes and jeans nearby helped identify the body. The next day, a deputy sheriff found a skull downhill from the bush, about 300 feet away, confirmed by dental records to have later been Hewitt's. His death, too, was attributed to hypothermia. In the area northwest of the trailer, roughly a quarter mile away, searchers found 3 Forest Service blankets and a rusted flashlight by the road. It cannot be determined how long those items have been there. Since Matthias had presumably not taken his medication, pictures of him were distributed to mental institutions all over California. However, no trace of him has ever been found. Wyher's body was on a bed with 8 sheets wrapped around it, including the head. The autopsy showed that he had died of starvation and hypothermia. Wyher had actually lost around 100 pounds, and the growth of his beard suggested that he lived as long as 3 weeks from when he was last shaved. His feet were severely frostbitten, almost gangrenous. On a table next to the bed were some of Wyher's personal effects, including his wallet full of cash, a nickel ring with Ted engraved on it, and a gold necklace he also wore. Also on the table was a gold watch without its crystal, which Wyher's family said was not his. Most puzzling to the investigators was how Wyher came to his fate. No fire had been set in the trailer's fireplace, despite an ample supply of matches and paperback novels to use as kindling. Heavy forestry clothing, which could have kept the men warm, remained where it had been stored. A dozen sea ration cans from the storage shed outside had been opened, and their contents consumed. Still, a locker in the same shed with an even larger amount of food, enough to keep all 5 men alive for a year, had not even been opened. Also, another shed nearby held a butane tank with a valve that, had it been open, would have fed the trailer's heating system. Wyatt's family members said he lacked common sense due to his mental disability. For example, he often asked why he should stop at a stop sign, and one night had to be dragged out of bed while the ceiling of his bedroom was burning in a house fire because he was afraid that he would miss his job if he got up. It also seemed that Wyatt had not been alone in the trailer and that Matthias, possibly Hewitt, had been in there with him. Matthias' sneakers were in the trailer and the C rations had been opened with a P-38 can opener, with which only Matthias or Madraga would have been familiar with from their military service. Matthias, his feet perhaps also swollen from frostbite, would have decided to put on Wyatt's shoes on instead if he decided to go outside. The sheets all over Wyatt's body also suggested that one of the others had been there with him, as his condition would have put him in too much pain to pull them over his body himself. Even knowing that 4 of the 5 men had died in the Sierra, investigators still could not explain entirely what led to their deaths. They had still found no explanation for why the men were there. However, they learned that Matthias had friends in the small town of Forbstown. Police believe it was possible that in an attempt to visit them on the way back home, the men may have taken a wrong turn near Oroville that put them on the mountain road. For whatever reason, the men left the Montego. They had, instead of going back down the road where they had passed the lodge that Jones had later returned to, continued along the road in the direction they were initially going. Purposeful motion like that is not consistent with the circular patterns traveled by those who generally believe themselves lost. The day before the men went missing, a snowcat had gone along the road in that direction to clear snow off the trailer's roof so it would not collapse. It was possible, police believed, that the group had decided to follow the tracks it left through snowdrifts 4 to 6 feet high to wherever they led, believing shelter was not too far away. Most likely, Madraga and Sterling died of hypothermia about halfway through the long walk to the trailer. It is assumed that the other 3 broke the window to enter once they found the trailer. Since it was locked, they may have believed it was private property and feared arrest for theft if they used anything they found there. After Whitehair died, or after the others thought he had died, they may have decided to get back to civilization in different ways, such as walking overland. There's still a question that a lot of people have. What happened to Gary Mathis? A lot of people online believe that he either became victim of foul play or that he just succumbed in the wilderness and that he was eaten by animals. With that being said, that's all she wrote for today's series premiere of Critical Crime. Tune in next week for another episode. Check out our social media as we started the giveaway today. More information will be on our social media at Critical Crime 1. But for now, that's all I have for you guys. Till next week, don't forget to keep it critical.